Morning. The reading for the sermon is taken from John chapter 10. It's a passage entitled, Jesus the Good Shepherd. Very truly I tell you, this is Jesus speaking, very truly I tell you, anyone who does not enter the sheepfold by the gate, but climbs in by another way is a thief and a bandit. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for the shepherd, and the sheep hear the voice of the shepherd who calls each one of them by name and leads them out. After bringing all of them out, the shepherd goes ahead of them, and the sheep follow because they know the shepherd's voice. They will not follow a stranger, but they will run away because they do not know the voice of strangers. Jesus used this figure of speech with them, but they did not understand what he was saying. So again, Jesus said to them, very truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and bandits, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters by me will be saved, and will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they might have life and have it abundantly. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd is willing to die for the sheep. The hired hand who is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and runs away. And the wolf snatches them and scatters them. The hired hand runs away because a hired hand does not care for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my own and my own know me, just as God knows me and I know God. And I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that do not belong to this fold. I must bring them also. And they will listen to my voice. So there will be one flock, one shepherd. For this reason God loves me, because I lay down my life in order to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have power to lay it down, and I have power to take it up again. I received this command from my father and mother. So many of you may be familiar with this passage and the analogy that Jesus uses with sheep and shepherd. The first thing I want to talk about is that why would he use an analogy of sheep and shepherd? It's a little harder for us to relate to that in these times because most of us are not exposed to living on a farm and having sheep and having that as part of our livelihood. But if you go back 2,000 plus years, I can imagine that sheep, especially in the Mediterranean area, was just a very common thing. Shepherding was probably considered a respectable profession and quite popular. So we understand that God and Jesus uses certain analogies in order to help us understand concepts. Puts it into a way that we can relate to, that we can then apply it to our spiritual life, which follows that principle that I've taught about called as above, so below. So that we can look at things on the earth look like this. It occurs in a similar vibration, a similar dynamic inwardly. Sometimes people get a little indifferent to the idea of being called sheep because, well, who wants to be a sheep? That's not really considered a very, high aspiration. But if you tune into what the energy of what he's saying is that sheep are followers of a shepherd. And that is the way. Who is that shepherd? Well, he's being clear. Well, this is an interesting aspect of the biblical teachings, especially the way Jesus teaches, is that for some people, when he says, I am the good shepherd, we stop there, we go, I must follow Jesus. And that's okay, because that would be a good investment. But for those who are pursuing the mystical path, we have to be more relaxed and allow that teaching to unfold over time, so that we may understand that. Because also in the same passage, Jesus says, well, I am the good shepherd. But he's also saying, I am the gate. Well, how is that possible? How can he be two things? That's possible when you understand that the role of Jesus changes as you progress along the way. And he often is speaking as the Christ, the presence of God within. People say, I'm a follower of Christ, and they think, well, that must mean you follow this man, Jesus. But actually, Jesus' last name, as we know, is not Christ. It's him speaking on behalf of this high energy of God that exists within each one of us. So it's hard to understand this stuff unless you experience it. So until you experience Jesus as the gate, you probably are going to be more focused on Jesus as the shepherd. I want to outline the 3 P's of his teaching. There's a plan, there's a process, and there's pitfalls. The plan is all sheep would be united into one grand sheepfold. So you can think of that as all souls will eventually be unified in this vibration of Christ consciousness, with the Christ as the shepherd within. And if this were to happen, well, what a glorious planet we would live on. It's such a beautiful planet, and there's so many abundant resources here. And right now, many are following the sheep, the thieves, and the bandits, and therefore they're being guided to do things that are more about making profits and selfishly indulging in their egos and taking advantage of people sexually and taking advantage of or moping and weeping and just being, sad and kind of non-participatory. And that's because they may be following the wrong shepherd. Jesus says, all who came before me are thieves and bandits. So there is an absolute to this path, which is ultimately you will be following the Christ that is within you. That's the plan. Now, we need a process, because as human beings, we have the capacity to think freely, so we don't have to follow this path or follow that path. But if somebody says, well, this sounds good, I'm kind of with you, keep going, well, then you need a process. And he talks about the process being, that you are following the shepherd and that you have to pass through a gate. And the gatekeeper opens the gate and you are allowed to come in and you go out. And you are in this dynamic of following the shepherd. In the beginning, that is mostly about following the teachings of Jesus because he is the way. He lived it and he was trying to demonstrate what that means. Now, for some, that just may be at this kind of high level of living a moral life of goodness. And for some people, that's all that they want to do, because this idea of going inwardly and beginning to really explore all the wounds of the past and all the concepts and beliefs that may prevent you from having more love flow through you, for some people, that's just not in the cards for them right now. Could it be? Yeah, but to the same degree, there are some people who want to go to medical school and they're like, it's going to take me 10 years, I don't care. I'm driven because I must be a doctor. And so that's good. Let those people go and pursue that journey. And because their heart is so convicted in that, when it gets hard and they have to spend these 3 nights up at the hospital and all this kind of stuff, I don't know that much about it, but they're like, yeah, but this is what I want to do. And I believe that we in this room have that desire to know the Christ, to know God, and to then live from that place. So when it gets hard, you don't go, oh my God, what's up with this? Or you don't go, oh, this must be wrong. You go, they said it was going to be hard at times, so I'm just going to, persist through these difficult patches. So there is a path, and that's essentially what we're teaching here. And it really begins with, first of all, you wander into a place like this and you go, I don't know why, I feel good about it. I like the teaching, I like the vibe. So that's kind of the first start. And then there's the, okay, well, what's next? And so then most people choose to do a retrospection, and they retrospect their whole life. And then they start to realize, wow, like there's a lot of pain in there, and there's a lot of sadness in there, and there's a lot of anger in there, and there's a lot of confusion. And through the help of the priest, who is acting as a sort of an interim shepherd, helps you to see the choices that you have made, so that you no longer sit there and go like, yes, the world has been against me all my life. We go, let's follow the principles of cause and effect, and go that nothing is immune from the principle of cause and effect. Therefore, when I draw adversity to me, there must be some cause that draws that effect to me. Now, some people might get angry and go like, well, you're saying it's all my fault. No, because the people on the other end who might have caused you grief are responsible. But we can't fix that, and if we just sit there and go like, I've got to figure out a way not to be harmed by other people, we start to create a very constricting way of living. So instead, what we want to do is recognize what are the causes that are brewing within us, so that the effects we may draw to us raise us up, and we become somewhat distant from that kind of old karma. We're not totally immune because you have to move about, a large city like Chicago, and you have a large degree of the population that is not interested in anything like this. So we have to learn how to love in the midst of a turbulent environment. However, you will find that if you surrender to the shepherd and the teachings, that slowly but surely your karma will catch up with you, and there really will not be that many unexpected challenges coming your way. Not until God says, oh, you're ready to move on, you're ready to grow to the next level. And we can look to Jesus as the example, because when his 3-year ministry was coming to an end, he had to go through a fairly intense transformation. So his body was scourged and he was crucified and essentially he was murdered, and it was probably really, really painful. And then a huge transformation where he went through this, amazing thing, and he comes back to life in a regenerated body. So you have to sometimes think about Jesus as a human who went through this incredible experience that God put him through. That's going to change you forever. And then, following the retrospection, there's baptism, and that's a declaration that you would like to be part of the body of Christ. And we'll see what that looks like today. And then we move into, okay, just teach me how to live. Teach me how to be in accord with God. And for those of you who become students, you know what that's like. There's a certain amount of pressure to do spiritual work every day and share it with your teacher. So there's a process. Now he talks about the pitfalls. One of the things that comes up in the passage is the hired hand. Now, why would there be a hired hand if there's a shepherd? Well, perhaps the flock can be so large that at times one shepherd cannot be there for everybody. That's one way to look at it, so that there are other people who step up to be in charge. But let's try to tune into what the hired hand might be like for our internal journey. The only thing that we know about the hired hand is that when things get difficult, the hired hand runs away. The hired hand does not care for the soul that you are, the sheep that you are, as the shepherd does. So for today's passage, I would like you to think of the hired hand as your ego. That when things get difficult, your ego abandons you as soul and does what it needs to do in order to take care of yourself. But what does Jesus do as the Good Shepherd? He says, I'm willing to lay down my life. I'm willing to stand between you, the soul, and the wolf that is coming your way. And he says, nobody makes me do that. I do that of my own accord. Now, there's many levels to that. One level is he's saying, as a human walking the earth who is called to be the Messiah, I'm willing to die in order that I may show you what truth is and what love is. I will not abandon my principles and my teaching, because God has asked me to be an example, as to show you what it looks like. And when they say, well, we're going to crucify you, and he has that moment where Pilate goes like, don't you have anything to say for yourself? I mean, you're going to die. I have the power. And Jesus goes, you don't have any power over me. Only that which the Father has given you. So in that moment, he's not fazed when he recognizes that he may lose his life. We are unlikely to be called to lose our physical lives, but we are called to lose the life that we thought our life was going to be. I've not met one person who shows up and who seeks the path that does not have a certain attachment to a life that they thought they were going to have, and to a certain degree are still trying very aggressively to fudge that square peg life into the round hole. The reason that it's square peg and round hole is because God generally has been absent. Because when God is present, those rough edges of the square get smoothened out. So we lose the rough edginess of ourselves and we become the sheep, and then we glide into that hole. But there's a kind of I must get my needs met, and this world is not very safe and not very comforting, and people are not really reliable, and I'm not really reliable, so I got to figure out a way to get the life I want so I can just relax, I guess. But the relaxation is in surrendering to God. To recognize when the hired hand or the ego has become the leader and the shepherd of your life, and then abandons your whole path to God because something difficult happens. Okay, if that happens, you go, I probably shouldn't follow that part of me. I should recognize when the ego is speaking on behalf of the shepherd. And remember that when times get tough, that part of me will not support what I'm trying to do. And there's no way to avoid things getting tough on a real spiritual journey. Whether you're a Christian or a Buddhist or a Sufi or Jewish or whatever, at some point it all converges to this place that's the same. And then when Jesus said, there are other sheep who are not part of my fold, but I must get them also. From my perspective, that means as you approach the top of the hierarchy, and there is a hierarchy, this is what is taught to us as priests, that there is a spiritual hierarchy of love. And so that there are angels and there are archangels, and then there are high spiritual beings. And why are they high spiritual beings? Because they worked harder and longer and dedicated themselves to being the most lighted that they can. Like when you go to a doctor, you probably want to go to the greatest specialist that you can find for the particular thing that you have, right? You don't go like, well, all people are equal, so it doesn't matter if it's this guy or that. This guy's just got a medical school, but he's probably just as good as this guy who's done surgery for 20 years. No, we respect and we are drawn to those souls that do the work and who, through wisdom and experience, progress. Now, on the high spiritual levels of the real echelon of teachers, most, if not all, acknowledge Jesus as pretty high up there. And at that point, it's not about Christianity and Judaism and Sufism and all that. It's about truth and love and who has been assigned by God to be that. So sometimes people get really caught up on this. Well, he says that only through me shall you see the face of the Father, or you must come through me. What he's teaching there is that you will only know the truth and be part of the fold when you come into the Christ consciousness. When you pass through that gate inwardly into the presence. It's a very real experience. It's not just some esoteric teaching. And so people think, well, you're saying I have to be a Christian. No, you don't have to be a Christian, because everybody has a connotation about that. But everybody has the presence of Christ within. In each religion, they may call it something different. But it is that presence of God. And to enter into that, somebody has to open the gate for you. And you can think of that as the removal of the veil. You might read about that in the Bible. That the veil between you and the Christ has to be removed. And it is only removed by your humility and your surrendering to the process and to a shepherd, whether it be a priest or, in a very rare instance, you don't have any teachers around, so you do all that work yourself. And then the signature of a sheep is humility. It doesn't mean that you are a meek and, uninteresting person. The essence of sheep in this reading is about following that which is leading you, and for your good, so that you may be happy in the flock. So remember the plan. The plan is all souls shall be in Christ consciousness. There may come a point, according to the biblical teaching, where time is up, and for those who did not want anything to do with that, you'll be heading in this direction. And I don't really know where that direction is. But kind of like if you don't finish undergrad, you don't get to go to grad school. Because in grad school, we operate at this level, and we need to keep things moving at this pace. And we can't all of a sudden go like, for the one person who didn't complete the undergrad, we can't slow everything down because these other people going like, well, I thought this was graduate school. So that's an expression of love for all those souls who have done the work. We have a tendency to go like, well, that's not fair for the one person. If you knew how much time and how much grace was given to you to complete your undergrad, you wouldn't think that it's unfair. You would hopefully responsibly go like, man, I kind of slacked off. And is it too late? I don't like to get into that kind of doomsday style biblical teaching. But within myself, I do think there's a point when it might be a little late. And so you sometimes feel that from ministers or from Christians, like there's a pressure to get going. And if you're a student, you're going to feel pressure because let's get going. Let's get you to a point where that past of you is healed and you're free. And then slowly but surely you realize, oh, I'm called to be a shepherd. Now I can actually speak words that help people move towards the gate. I may not be at the point where I can be the one to open the gate for them. That's generally reserved for master teachers. Those are teachers who can bring you into realization. Now, you don't hear that kind of language in the Bible. That's more the mystical language. That there are initiating points where you actually do get invited in because you have earned that. So it's actually really cool and really exciting and really deep and really meaningful, and it's hard at times because you walk out of here and then the world calls upon you to do your grocery shopping and your laundry, and you got to deal with your texting, and you got to deal with your bills, and yeah. And then there's all the fun things that you can do, playing volleyball and having a glass of wine and all that. And it's not like any of that is cut off. But remember that we are sheep and we must follow the presence of God. So, okay, you have one glass of wine, and then you can feel this nudge inside, like I probably shouldn't have more because it's Sunday afternoon, and then my Sunday night's going to be kind of a write-off, and then Monday I'm going to feel crappy, I won't be able to meditate. So the Christ in you is sending a little nudge going like, why don't you stop here? And then you go, well, I'm just going to have enough. Or, guess who takes over? The hired hand. Who goes, come on, what does it matter? You got to be with your friends, right? You want to be loved. I'm like, that's weird. Tricky. So you have to be able to discern between the voice of the hired hand and the voice of the Good Shepherd. And the more that you do this work and the more that you meditate, the more sensitive you become to those stirrings of your soul. And then one day you realize, oh, I don't even want to have that one glass of wine, and people don't like me more or less if I have the glass of wine, so it doesn't really matter. I can just sit here and just, sip something else, and just hang out, and just radiate love and light for people, and maybe they will accept me because of that, as one example. So remember, there's a plan. Seek out the process, try to follow it, and be aware of the pitfalls.